I'm here with the Infiniti QX30S, an all-new SUV model from Infiniti. The QX30 is actually the smallest car in the Infiniti range, even though it is an SUV. And the story behind this car is actually quite interesting. Infiniti actually borrowed the entire chassis, engine, and transmission from the Mercedes GLA. So this car has the same 2.0-liter turbo engine as that car, and it is available with all-wheel drive, but we have the Sport model, which is the top of the range, and that means it's only front-wheel drive mated to a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. And I'm in the Angeles Forest on the Angeles Crest Highway to try and see if the Sport actually is a sport. Can this small little SUV actually be a sports car? And I've come to the unique conclusion that this car could have been a sports car, even though it is a SUV that would be good for a small family, a very small family, because it is a little bit cramped in this cabin. This car does actually have a lot of sporty character. The steering is really fantastic. It's nicely weighted, that nice German steering that Infiniti got from the Mercedes GLA. It does feel a lot more German in character than it does Japanese. Japanese cars typically have a lot more steering assist, whereas this just really feels nice in hand, and it's got a nice wheel, the same one that you would find in the GLA. Now, this car is actually sold as the Q30 in Europe, which is a hatchback model. But for the American market, Infiniti thought that they could sell this car better if it was an SUV. So they raised it up a few inches to try and sell it to those American consumers that just really prefer SUVs over hatchbacks. And it's the same decision that Mercedes made on its end with the GLA. Now the GLA is based on the A-Class, which is a small hatchback model that's offered in Europe. I've never had a chance to drive the A-Class, but I think it's a far better looking model to the GLA, and if it was available in the US, it would be the one I'd rather have. And I think I'm reaching the same conclusion with the QX30. I wish that Infiniti would have just left well enough alone and would have just marketed this in the US as a Q30. I think it would have been great. It could have been a revitalized version, a good successor to the Acura RSX, which is one of my favorite front-wheel drive cars of all time. Now, the Acura hasn't made anything like the RSX in a while, and Infiniti had a real good chance here to take away the buyers that have been looking for something like the RSX since 2006 when the car was discontinued. I'm here on the canyons, and I'm wishing that I had a little bit of that all-wheel drive stability found on the other versions of the QX30. The Sport model is only available in front-wheel drive, and that's kind of a shame. It actually is a fantastically driving car, but the added ride height kind of ruins your confidence through these tight corners, and you can feel the back tires start to lose grip and the car rotate a little bit, which is really fun. But you start to lose confidence when the added ride height just gives this car a lot more body roll that it doesn't necessarily need. And I wish there was a little bit more bolstering on these seats. These are pretty much the same seats that you'll find in the GLA, and they're really firm like a German car, but they don't offer the same bolstering that you'd find on a sportier model like a Volkswagen GTI or a Golf R that really holds you into place. So that, along with the increased ride height, is making me a bit sick on these canyon roads. And I've driven a couple of cars here, including a GTI, a Golf R, and a Nissan Maxima. And even the Maxima, which is a big, heavy sports sedan, just felt a lot more comfortable going around these corners. Now, the Maxima was a really interesting car because it's from the Nissan product line where they took a really comfortable car in the Maxima and gave it really sport suspension on the SV trim that I had, and it really ruined the ride comfort. And so far, driving the QX30 Sport, I think they might have made the same mistake here. I had the option of getting a QX30 Luxury as a press car with all-wheel drive instead of this car, but come on, I have these California roads to drive. I took the Sport model. I was on the highway with this car, and I hit a small bump, and the suspension nearly shot me into the ceiling. It was really uncomfortable. So for a long distance cruiser, I would definitely say that the luxury is the better package to buy on the QX30. The interior is really a mixed bag of nice materials, but some really terrible ergonomic design. Now, the front dials are really nice. They just have this nice chrome bezel around them, and they're really clear and fantastic. I love them. But the center screen is just this monochrome display that reads minimal information. I have it set to read a speedometer, a digital speedometer, so that I can tell my speeds through these canyon roads. And it can also show you things like fuel economy and your trip computer and other things like that. But it really looks ugly in an otherwise really well-appointed interior. The materials are great. The steering wheel is nice leather, and it's nicely bolstered. I have nice thumb grips, and the paddle shifters are incredibly fun to use. Now, cycling through those modes is a bit of a pain, because this is the same shifter you'll find in the GLA, and the only way to shift from the comfort, sport, and manual modes is this little tiny button next to the shifter that's really hard to find when you're actually on the move. The rest of the interior, you know, Infiniti made some changes to make it feel more like an Infiniti cabin than a Mercedes cabin, but it still, you know, has a lot of that Mercedes layout, and I don't like what they did on the GLA with these climate controls. They're automatic, but they're buried way down here, so you really have to take your eyes off the road in order to reach them. And the radio is this hot mess of controls on the dashboard. Like, I have my volume control here, but I had trouble just finding the tuner, which is a button instead of a dial, so it's not that easy to use. And it also has one of these controllers, sort of like the Mercedes command unit that Infiniti changed a little bit. But then the whole thing is also a touch screen, so you can use it that way too. It's a mixed bag, and I really don't care that much for the infotainment system, especially since this is a $40,000 car that I'm driving, and it doesn't even come with navigation. So I'm forced to take my air vent mounted phone holder and put my phone there to use Google Maps, which is really cheap feeling in a car that's $40,000. Styling wise, I think Infiniti did really well with the QX30. I think it's better looking than the GLA, and I think the Q30 is even better looking when it's lower down in a hatchback style. So I think the styling is really great. If you put one of these in your driveway, your neighbors are definitely going to be impressed. It's a very good looking car, especially in this lovely ruby red color that I have here. And the sport model, although it's not necessarily my favorite in terms of ride comfort, the ride is really stiff, you do get those really pretty dark gray aluminum wheels that just make the car look really fantastic and sporty. That 2-liter turbocharged engine is plenty. It's got about 208 horsepower and 250 foot-pounds of torque. I think it's 258 foot-pounds of torque. That 2.0-liter turbocharged engine is plenty with this 7-speed dual clutch. The 7-speed dual clutch isn't great in traffic, but out on the canyons it shifts incredibly well. And this car really does make the whooshy turbo noises that you come to expect from a turbocharged engine. It's a little loud on acceleration, but when you actually want it to feel sporty, it can do it. The Infiniti QX30 is a car that I think could have been perfect if Infiniti had just kept it a hatchback instead of making it a small SUV to appease the American market. This would have been an extremely well-handling car. I look forward to see if Infiniti gets permission from Mercedes to give the QX30 that full-on AMG drivetrain that comes in the GLA 45, where the power is up to almost 400 horsepower from a 2.0-liter turbocharged engine with all-wheel drive. I think if Infiniti could get a hold of that drivetrain and put it in this car, which is better looking, I think, than the GLA, they would have a perfect car in their hands. I was really quick to want to recommend the QX. I was really quick to want to recommend the QX30 as a good car for a working class person with, you know, good disposable income and a smallish family that didn't really need to haul around a ton of passengers or a ton of cargo, it works really well for that. But the sport model is definitely not the one that is going to be the right choice for most people. And starting at just under 30 grand, this car is actually extremely affordable. And I've heard that Infiniti is doing some very good leases on it. So if you're looking for a luxurious car that doesn't break the bank and it has to be a new car, the Infiniti QX30 is a pretty good buy. Although I think there are some other alternatives on the lower end market, like from Volkswagen, that aren't luxury cars, but give you just as many features on the inside and actually better ergonomic design. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Infiniti QX30.